Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Local Review Body for Monday, the 23rd of June, 2025. As is the norm, I will make some introductions to start with. Hoping with me today, joining me a part of the body, will be on my left, Councillor Ian Massey, and to my right, Councillor Dave Cuthbert. And I'm Councillor Bob Braun, the convener of the meeting. We are, by requirement, members of the Planning and Placemaking Committee. I also have with me today, to my far left, Mr. Jeff Fogg, who is our legal advisor, and to his left, Miss Audrey Brown from Democratic Services. We also have, unusually today online, Mrs. Leslie Tierney, who is a planning advisor to the LRB. She has had no involvement whatsoever with any of these cases until they came forward for appeal. As I say, because of the short agenda we have today and for other circumstances, she's joining us online. So members, can we move to the next part of the agenda? Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Massey.
None.
And Councillor Cuthbert.
None.
None. Thank you very much. Minutes of the last meeting. I know the two of you were not on this committee, so I'm happy to approve those minutes for the 28th of May 2025. So that now brings us to the main part of the agenda today and our two cases that we're going to be looking at. So the first one coming up on the agenda is item 4.1, which is the change of use of a flat to short-term let accommodation unit at 15 Vassart Court in Perth. And Mrs. Tierney, if you could introduce this one for us.
Yes, thank you, convener. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we'll run through the slides to start with, please. So location of the appeal site here, central location within Perth, as you can see there, to the north side of the city centre, and it's indicated there with the yellow star. And if we zoom in a bit more closely, you'll see the surrounding area. To the east is the main city centre area. There's also the retail park, St Catherine's Retail Park to the west, and also some mixed uses to the kind of north there, with the main central area here, Monart Road and Vassart Court, wholly residential in nature, and again the yellow star indicating the location of the appeal site. And then some drawings that were submitted with the application. So the red line application site boundary. So that obviously goes round the floor area of the flat, and the odd shape there is where it takes you round outside to the location of the parking space for this property. And then that's just zooming in on that, so you can see that in a bit clearer. The floor plan of the flat, and then the location of the parking area outside. And then this is just the floor plan of the flat, as you can see, fairly standard two-bedroom property, kitchen, lounge, and bathroom. And then these are some photographs. So this is looking north as you head into the complex. The parking space here is kind of in the middle of that building, on the main building that you can see there. And then as we move around and look in the opposite direction now to where the flat is located, you can see first floor property there, a couple of windows within that yellow rectangle. And then just from the front of the property, and then again just from the front of the property, and then we can also see here the main communal access door to the flats in this block. And then this is now just kind of turning round from that door, looking at the remainder of the flats in this kind of cul-de-sac that goes round and back out. And then this is a view of the communal door. And then as you move into the communal area, you can see other doors to other properties and the stairs that lead upstairs. And then this is the door of the property on a landing with one other flat access from this landing area. And then this is the going out again from the ground floor back out the other door to the other side, which we'll see in the next couple of slides. So this is now from the opposite side, the Mill Lade, looking at that block, and then more closely in the next slide. You can see that door that takes you out, communal door that takes you out, and the location of the property within the yellow rectangle. And then that's us with the presentation there. So yes, this appeal is for a change of use of flat to short-term let accommodation at 15 Vassart Court, Perth. The property is a 2-bedroomed flat and is located on the first floor of a large 4-storey modern residential building. This block has communal stairs and landing areas that are shared with other properties within the block. Entry is via a security door, which then leads to a hallway with the entrance to one other residential property and a set of stairs. When up the stairs, the property is accessed via a shared entrance lobby, which also serves one other flat. In terms of the local development plan, the Vassart Court area is located out with the city centre of Perth for the purposes of short-term lets and is therefore within an area which is considered to be residential. There are around 200 flats in this development which will either be owned or privately rented, although there may be some student accommodation there. As noted in other applications which have been refused and then dismissed by the LRB in this area, there are some short-term lets which have been in place for a sufficient period of time that they would be potentially considered to be lawful. So the reasons for refusal, firstly, by virtue of the potential for an increase in noise nuisance, both when using the property and leaving the property, the proposal would impact adversely on the existing character and amenity of the local area, which is predominantly residential in character, particularly the residential amenity of those living permanently in the block and close by. Accordingly, the proposal is contrary to Policy 30E Tourism of MPF4, which states that new proposals for short-term holiday letting will not be supported where the proposal will result in an unacceptable impact on local amenity and character of the area. Secondly, by virtue of the shared entry arrangements, the flatted nature of the property and the predominantly residential character of the existing area, the proposal would result in an increased potential for noise nuisance and general disturbance to occur and affect other existing residents in the block and those living close by. It would also introduce a land use which is not compatible with the surrounding predominantly residential properties. The proposal is therefore contrary to Policy 17 residential areas of the Perth and Kinross LDP and the Council's non-statutory planning guidance on short-term lets, which both seek to protect existing residential amenity, and Policy 1A of the adopted local plan, which seeks to ensure that all new proposals contribute positively to the surrounding environment. Thirdly, by virtue of the potential for an increase in noise nuisance, both when using the property and leaving the property, the proposal is contrary to Policy 56 of the LDP, which looks to protect sensitive receptors from noise generating sources. And finally, it has not been demonstrated that there is a sufficient level of either designated or available parking to service the use of the property as a short-term let. The proposal is therefore contrary to the principles of the National Roads Development Guide 2015, which requires all new developments to have suitable parking provision. So in terms of the assessment by the Planning Service, the property is located within the city boundary of Perth, but out with the city centre area. The city centre area is defined for the purposes of STL assessment as being parts of the city which come under the city, town and neighbourhood areas and the city centre secondary uses area. In light of this, the proposal is therefore considered to be inconsistent with the relevant LDP2 policies and the STL guidance simply because it is within a residential area, involves a residential flatted property with shared access arrangements, and there are not any obvious existing uses within the area which would already impact on residential amenity. It is acknowledged that the loss of permanent residential accommodation to STLs may be acceptable if outweighed by demonstrative evidence of impact on local economy. This property is a 2-bed property, so it would not be of the scale which the council is perhaps concerned about losing from permanent housing stock in the area. Accommodation which has 4 or more beds is more of a concern, and this is set out in the STL guidance. However, there is sufficient tension with Policy 30 of MPF4, and on balance, this proposal is considered to be incompatible with the policy intent, principally because the area is largely residential with little other uses. Although Environmental Health have no objections, nevertheless, there is a more balance of probability that some adverse impact may start to occur. So a precautionary approach is therefore considered appropriate here, which ultimately means a refusal and which aligns with the guidance of the STL in relation to areas which are predominantly residential. There is parking provision within the area, and it's understood the property will have its own allocated space. However, the property could generate the need for 2 or more car parking spaces, and it has not been fully demonstrated that there is sufficient parking provision to accommodate this. It's also highlighted by the Planning Service that a number of recent DPEA decisions have been issued where reporters have taken the view that a material change of use does not automatically take place if a residential flat moves to an STL. In the view of the reporters unit, the key test is the length of stays, how the unit is being used, i.e. business versus holiday use, and the size of the unit. If the length of stays is likely to be longer and perhaps used for business purposes, then there will be a lower level of arrival, departure and daily movement occurring, which would not be too dissimilar to that of a typical residential usage. And as such, the change of use to an STL should not be considered a material change of use, but it is noted that that's obviously in the view of the Department of Planning and Environmental Appeals. So turning to the applicant's case, with regard to reasons 1 and 2, the importance of protecting the amenity of existing residents is acknowledged, and to this end, the proposed STL will be restricted to a maximum of 4 guests and will be rented exclusively to families and couples, not groups or partygoers. A management plan is included setting out these operational provisions for strict guest screening and booking terms, prohibition of events or group gatherings, on-call contact for neighbours and residents to report any concerns, and a professional cleaning and inspection routine after each stay. With regard to reason 3, the property will be responsibly managed with restrictions in place to mitigate noise and ensure respectful use by all guests. The use of the flat as a short-term let is not inherently more disruptive than standard residential use when properly regulated. Within the safeguards in the management plan, there will be no unacceptable impact on sensitive receptors. With regard to reason 4, the flat includes a designated private parking space within the development, which will be made available to all short-term let guests. There is no anticipated pressure on on-street or shared parking, and this satisfies the requirements set out in the National Roads Development Guide 2015. With regard to other considerations, there are several other properties in the surrounding area that are currently operating as short-term lets, which demonstrates that such uses can be compatible with the local character when properly managed, and the proposed change of use contributes to local tourism. And just in terms of other matters, with regard to the other STL properties there being referred to by the applicant, the LRB will be aware that these will either be lawful or appeals will have been dismissed, and the Planning Service will be monitoring these properties to ensure they are not operating as STLs, or enforcement will be taken to uphold the dismissal by the LRB. And finally, there's one letter of objection noting concerns about the impact on the character of the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tierney. We'll open up to questions. Councillor Massey.
I think you've summed that up extremely well. I only have really one question. I don't really know if it's a question for yourself or for the applicant. It's concerning parking. It says that it's going to be used, that the STL is going to be used for families. Now, families could have more than one car, so parking would be a problem if there's only one car parking space. Would that not be correct?
I mean, yes, I would agree. I mean, it is only a 2-bedroom property. You know, you could say a family of 4 would only be coming in 1 car, but I suppose there's a possibility for more. I think it's possibly more that, as you can see in the photographs, it's very dense, and whilst there is parking there, there could potentially be some conflict there.
Councillor Cuthbert.
No, you've answered all my questions very succinctly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no questions either. So members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we need more information? Councillor Massey
Happy to go to the vote.
and Councillor Cuthbert.
Happy to proceed.
And I too am happy to proceed on this one. As with all short-term let applications, the core of the situation is residential amenity, and that's always a priority for us. In this instance, we have an application which is out with the centre of the city. We are in a residential area, and the introduction of a short-term let would effectively introduce a commercial operation into what is a residential area. We've always accepted the fact that with amenity we must be careful. There is a movement, obviously, of people. The applicant said it's mainly for families on short-term let and individuals. Obviously, there's going to be a movement of people, cars parking, cars going, luggage coming in, luggage going out. This obviously has an impact on the amenity of people living nearby. And the fact that there may not have been any records of antisocial behaviour is not in itself an indication that there is no problem. Noise and frequency of movement is also a problem, and with the best will in the world, and I accept the applicant has introduced his management plan here, that's not always easy to monitor. And obviously tourism is an important factor for Perth and Perth and Kinross, but it has to be with the effective control of the amenity in the area. It must be acceptable for the area in itself. The applicant has mentioned obviously other short-term lets in the area. We have no details of those. Some of those may come across through the LRB, as the advisor has said, and many of those have been refused. There may be others there operating beyond the usual 10-year limit. So taking all things into consideration, on this occasion, I am of opinion to refuse the appeal based upon the reasons for refusal, which are actually in the decision notice before us. So my decision is to refuse. Councillor Massey.
Thank you for that. I'm in agreement with you, even although the DP decisions issued when reporters have taken a view of material changes, views do not automatically take place if a residential flat moves to STL. I believe at this instance, the material changes are happening against policy 17, against policy 56, noise. So I'm in agreement with you and go for refusal.
And Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I agree, I'm afraid. My view is that there will be an impact on amenity. This is a residential area and it's not in the city centre. I think it's also a question that there's other precedents being set in the same block. So I will put forward to refuse the appeal.
Thank you, members. Mr. Fogg, a unanimous decision to refuse. I think, and as there's the conditions of refusals, actually the decision notice, and no change there at all. Okay. So members will now move on to the second and final item on our agenda today. That's item 4.2, which is the installation of solar panels and cabinet, South Lodge, Ballindine in Inchture. Mrs. Tierney, if you could introduce for us.
Yes, thank you, convener. Again, we'll just move through some slides. So firstly here, location of the appeal site, just to the northwest there of the A90 and Inchture within the rural area. And then just kind of zooming in there so you can see the location just up to the northwest there of the A90 on the way to Ballindine. And then this is just an aerial view of the property itself. So you can see the lodge building there at the entrance to the estate, and the garden area kind of extends towards the west. And then this is the site plan that was submitted with the planning application. So the red line is the application site boundary. The blue line is simply other land that they own, but it is all effectively garden and part of the property. So you can see that, well, this drawing shows you the location of the solar panels and the cabinet, but they are in more detail on the next slide. So we'll just move to that first. So existing roof plan here, which shows, so the vertical part on the right hand side, that's the existing original lodge building, and then the hatched L shape that comes over is the extension, and that is the that was built in 1983, I believe, and then a conservatory that was added in 1990. And then this is again the existing drawings, so you can see the existing lodge building top left, the more traditional part of the property, and then top right the existing northeast elevation. So again, that shows you on the left there the original part of the building, and then the shaded out area is the extension. And then moving to the other side, other elevation, you can see on the right with the double chimney, the original lodge building, and then the extension comes out along to where that conservatory is. And then the other elevation there, just effectively at the back of the property. And then this is the roof plan, which now shows the location of the solar panels, which would go on the front roof plane of the extension, and then also just on the rear there, where the battery storage unit would be located. And then this is in the elevation. So again, you can see the original lodge building on the right there with the double chimney, and the extension with the solar panels on the roof plane, and then the cabinet on the rear for the battery storage. And then just the other elevations that show the battery. And then these are just the technical specifications that were submitted with the application, so the battery storage and the solar panel specification as well. And then this is so some photographs now. So I think, as you can clearly see, this is the original lodge building that would have historically been the entrance to the wider estate. And then this is moving round to the east side of the property. So on the left-hand side of the image there, that's closest, that's the original lodge part, and then you can see the extension on the right-hand side there stretching out. And again, this is just another view of that, the original lodge and that side of the property. And then this is looking at the front of the property. You can see the original lodge gable there with the double chimneys coming out of the roof. And then you can see the extension there, and within the yellow circle where the solar panels would be located. And again, just an image there, so you can see the later added conservatory on the front where the solar panels would go on that extension, and then you can just see the gable of the original lodge. And then this is just from further down the garden, looking towards the east. And then again, further down the garden again. And then this is the rear where the battery storage unit would go on the rear elevation there of the extension. And then this is a view of the property from the roadside. So this is heading from Ballandine towards the east. So you can probably just make out the chimneys there. And then again, slightly closer. Again, you can just make out the chimneys behind the hedge there. And then this image was submitted by the appellant within their papers. So again, this just kind of gives you the context of the road, the access into the estate, the original gate piers, and the original frontage of that lodge building, with the extension and where the alterations are proposed not visible behind. So, as you can see, the application property is a single-storey detached dwelling house situated in a rural area to the northwest of Inchiture. The house is a Category B listed building at the southern entrance to the Category A listed Ballandine House, adjacent to the associated gate piers forming the principal entrance. The installation of 12 solar panels are proposed on the southwest roof elevation, and to install a battery storage cabinet adjacent to the northwest elevation of the house. The panels are of a typical standard design, 1.8 metres tall, and the row of panels would be 10.6 metres wide overall. The proposed battery storage cabinet is located in a relatively concealed location at the rear of the house. In terms of reasons for refusal, firstly, the proposed solar panels, by virtue of their modern design and materials, their total surface area, and their visually prominent siting, would be detrimental to the traditional character of the application property. Approval would therefore be contrary to Policy 16GI, Quality Homes of National Planning Framework 4, and contrary to Policies 1A and 1BC, Placemaking of the Perth and Kinross LDP 2. Secondly, the proposed solar panels, by virtue of their modern design and materials, their total surface area, and their visually prominent siting, would be detrimental to the traditional character and appearance of the Category B listed building. Approval would therefore be contrary to Section 59(1) of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Scotland Act 1997, which requires the Council as planning authority to have special regard to the desirability of preserving the listed building, contrary to Policy 7C, Historic Assets and Places Listed Buildings of MPF 4, contrary to Policy 27A, Listed Buildings of the Perth and Kinross LDP 2, and contrary to Historic Environment Scotland's guidance managing change in the historic environment micro-renewables. Thirdly, the application, due to the lack of a BAT survey, fails to demonstrate that BATs will not be affected by the proposal. Approval would therefore be contrary to Policy 4F, Natural Places, Protected Species of MPF 4, and contrary to Policy 41, Biodiversity of the Perth and Kinross LDP 2. And finally, the proposal, by virtue of the impacts on the character of the listed building and the lack of a BAT survey, is contrary to Policy 11C, Energy of MPF 4, and contrary to Policy 33A, New Proposals for Renewable and Low Carbon Energy of the Perth and Kinross LDP 2, which only support renewable energy generation technology if impacts on the historic environment and biodiversity have been satisfactorily addressed. So turning to the assessment by the Planning Service, it's appreciated that the applicant wishes to improve the energy efficiency of the house. The installation of solar panels at the property would be expected to make a positive contribution towards the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and associate climate change impacts. However, while MPF 4 Policy 11 encourages renewable energy impacts on the historic environment, these must be addressed and mitigated. Policy 33A of the LDP similarly supports the development of renewable and low carbon sources of energy, subject to the impact on visual amenity and the historic environment being taken into account. The Council's draft renewable and low carbon energy supplementary guidance provides further guidance on the criteria of Policy 33A, including roof mounted technology and their installation may impact on the fabric of historic buildings and the appearance and setting of listed buildings. These should be carefully installed and discreetly sited to not detract from the historic character or setting. It's the view of the Planning Service that, given the size of the house's curtilage, consideration could be given to other sources of renewable energy, such as the installation of ground-mounted solar panels in a discrete location that does not affect the setting of the listed building. In terms of visual amenity, the proposal is considered to be an incongruous addition to the traditional slate roof of the house. Due to the layout of the site, the proposed solar panels would be visible from the adjacent public road. Due to their modern design and materials, their total surface area and their prominent siting, the proposed solar panels would be detrimental to the traditional character of the house. And due to its siting in a relatively concealed location at the rear of the house and its modest scale, the proposed battery storage cabinet would not be detrimental to the traditional character of the house. And turning to the applicant's case, South Lodge is a single-storey gate lodge building at the south entrance to the former Ballandine House estate. It was originally built around 1832 in stone with a Scots slate roof. It more recently has had a substantial in-keeping modern brick and harled extension with Welsh slate roof added to the rear of the building in 1985. This more than doubled the size of the property. However, none of this extension is visible when viewing the property from the original front elevation. A conservatory of modern white PVC construction was added to this extension in 1990. The listing of the building was made before the above additions, but by default covers the new extension to the building in the listing. This was confirmed by Historic Environment Scotland. The applicant has also owned the building since 2017, although it's been in their family since 1989 when their parents retired there. The family have always lived locally, having been farmers in the Carse of Gowrie for many generations, and it's their intention to look after and preserve the property as much as they can. The applicant and their partner currently work or have worked in the government heritage sector and are more than sympathetic to this point. They hope that there is a balance to be struck in this case. The panels would be on the modern extension part of the building and would not affect any part of the original lodge, and therefore the listing description would remain accurate. On approach via the public road from Inchture, the solar panels would not be visible from the front south-facing aspect of the original listed property. Visitors using the driveway to Ballandine House estate to the east of the property can only see the south and east elevations of the lodge, so again the solar panels would not be visible. The solar panels would only be partially visible from the public road to the west, depending on the time of year and vegetation. The installation of mounting points on the slate roof would be non-structural and completely reversible in the future, possibly at a time of decommissioning or replacing of the system. The low profile and dark colouring of the panels gives minimal contrast between the installation and the slate roof. There is an existing modern white PVC conservatory already attached to the external wall of the extension. It seems strange to conclude that dark, low profile, low contrast solar panels on the roof would be more of a detriment to the traditional character of the building than this previously approved conservatory. There are two other residential buildings approximately 350 metres northwest, which, although not listed themselves, have been built to be in keeping with their adjacent B-listed walled gardens. These properties have low-profile solar panel installations that are also visible from the public road. The main heating and hot water system for the property is currently a gas combi boiler for central heating and hot water fueled by LPG gas, which is delivered and stored in an on-site LPG gas tank. This system dates back to the 1990s with narrow microbore piping, and with the current boiler being replaced in 2012. The whole system is nearing end of life and has been subject to much recent repair, and a new boiler will also be required in the next few years. The applicant wants to move away from gas fuel for a number of reasons as detailed in their submission, but including their wish to follow Scottish and UK government advice to move away from fossil fuels for a cleaner and more sustainable energy solution. And when they looked at the options for replacing the current LPG heating system with a limited budget, they started in 2019 to invest in infrared heating units in several rooms in order to gain several advantages, again as detailed in their submission. However, with electricity unit prices having more than doubled since 2021, the cost of electricity solely from the grid is now very expensive, and so they've turned to look at their own long-term renewable domestic solution, hence the solar panel and storage battery application. This kind of system would have several benefits and characteristics, again, as detailed in their submission. They've also considered other heating options, but these are less cost-effective and desirable. And finally, they would like to point out that they are nearly of retirement age and have a limited working budget just now, and will have less of such in the future. So they're trying to plan a sustainable energy strategy for the house and their future. They've confirmed they're happy to carry out a BAT survey if the appeal is upheld. And then finally, just to note the comments of the Conservation Officer, they note that while the panels do not affect the principal views from the southeast and northeast, they would be a prominent addition on a building of this scale, distracting both from its quality and architectural detail and from the wider historic setting inclusive of the adjacent listed gate piers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tierney. We'll now move, as we normally do, to questions. But if I may say, before we do, to clarify a point, my colleagues, yes, but mainly for the applicants, we have before us a planning application today, which we are now looking at. But there is an accompanying application, because this is a listed building, for listed building consent. Now, both papers obviously have been refused, which is why we're looking at the appeal for the planning. But the point I want to stress is that we are dealing with the planning application only. Consideration of the listed building consent is out with our permitted remit, and we cannot make a decision on that, unfortunately. I'll clarify that point a little bit later with Mr. Fogg, if I may. But if we then move on to questions, so Councillor Cuthbert, any questions?
I think your summaries have been very good today, so I've got no questions.
And Councillor Massey.
I'm of the same opinion. Summaries have been very good today, so thank you. No questions.
I too have no questions either. So we'll move on then to debate. Members, can we proceed to determine the application for review on the basis of the information before us? That is, the information contained within the papers and the presentation by the planning advisor, or do we need more information? Councillor Cuthbert?
Happy to proceed.
And Councillor Massey?
Happy to proceed as well.
I'm happy to proceed. So Councillor Cuthbert, if you could start us off.
Thank you, convener. I've been driven past this property, tried to see where the things would go. It's very difficult if you're coming from the west. My view on this one is that given the extension being modern, and I would say it's not of architectural noteworthiness, and the white PVC conservatory that's been put on the side of the building, I'm minded to approve the application and uphold the appeal. Yeah, I think that's.
Thank you for that. I feel it's always difficult when we have situations like this, because we have obviously a building that's listed because we want to preserve its appearance, but at the same time, of course, we have an application for renewable energy at a time when there is a desire to encourage people to have these. I visited the property, seen it from the front, from the east side, and obviously you won't see anything from that side of it. I've walked along the road to the west and turn around and come back again. It is very difficult to see the roof of the extension. Certainly if you're driving a car, you never see it at all. And I had to stand on tiptoes to actually see even part of the roof. With the 12 panels on there, on balance, and it is purely because of the location of the property, I think in this instance, that the appearance of those panels will be almost impossible to see from the road, walking or driving. I'm therefore of a mind to grant this application in this instance, to grant the appeal in this instance, based on the location of the property and the fact that, as I say, you cannot see these publicly very easily. Certainly not very easily. You'd have to really get on your tiptoes and have a peek over the bushes, really. So I'm happy to grant the appeal. As to the bat survey, I would like to see that as a condition, and I would suggest the condition wording should be that work should be done prior to any commencement of any installation of panels. Councillor Massey.
Thank you. I'm in agreement with both of you. I'm minded to grant. This is another example of somebody using sustainable energy to help Scotland get to net zero. I agree with all the reasons that both of you have said, so I'm minded to grant. Thank you.
Thank you both. Before I go to Mr. Fogg, could I ask if you're both in agreement with the bat survey and it should be done prior to any work's been done?
Convener, apologise for not raising this earlier, but it occurred to me belatedly. I think case law and EU advice is that where there's a possibility of protected species being at issue, that shouldn't be left to be covered by condition, but it's information that should be available to the report, to the decision maker before the decision is confirmed. That being the case, I wonder if the members would be agreeable to inviting the applicants to commission such a survey and have that lodged with the LRB application, and perhaps to avoid it coming back to a further meeting, delegate that to the planning advisor to assess, and if it's satisfactory for the application thereafter to be approved as you'd intended, but not to do as a condition, which I think is not a correct way for you to deal with it.
Thank you, Mr. Fogg. Giving your advice, I'm happy with that. My two colleagues happy with that? Councillor Massey, yeah. And Councillor Cuthbert?
I'm content with that.
Fine. So
There's also, convener, that as you pointed out, they don't have LBC consent. They would need it, so they couldn't be proceeding anyway, so they could perhaps commission the BAT survey, lodge that information whilst deciding what more they want to do. Advise they have not appealed the LBC refusal, perhaps due to misunderstanding, but they could resubmit that at the same time as presenting the BAT survey information and make some progress that way. That's obviously a matter for them.
Just to clarify, Mr. Fogg, they are too late now to appeal the LBC, is that correct?
I think so.
So they have to, a new application needed. So the situation, as I understand them, is that the applicant should organise a BAT survey, send that in, and also a new application for the list of building consent. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement with that.
Perhaps delegation is wonderful, but perhaps I could task Ms. Brown to provide extra explanation to them so they understand where their position.
I think I'll be happy with that, because I think there's been a bit of confusion reading the paperwork they've sent in as to what we can do and what we can't do. So I think that a clarification for them would be a good idea. Thank you for that. And members, that brings us to the end of this local review body. So it only leaves me to thank Councillor Massey, Councillor Cuthbert for being with me today and for their input and obviously work in reading all this. Mrs. Tierney, of course, her input as well. Thank you very much once again. I think our next meeting is actually in August, which is very much thanks to Councillor Massey, who's going to be in our planning and has organised that for us this year. So we'll be back in in August for 2 meetings. I wish it was October, but it won't be. It'll be August. So thank you very much all. We'll see you then. Thank you.